It's New Bedford Connections, where we meet prominent people from the greater New Bedford area. Now here's your host, Paul Santos.
A little bit about your background. Obviously, you grew up in New Bedford, right?
Right.
Whereabouts now?
I grew up on Moses Street on the south end. So a lot of my haunts appear in the book.
Right.
You know, the beach, the mills, the dike.
This book, it's about a person who grew up in the south end of New Bedford, so obviously your own influences end up in the book.
Sure. I'm calling on a lot of my memories of growing up here.
Right.
The places I went to, the things my family did.
We had a gentleman by the name of James Baldwin. Tell us about James Baldwin.
Yeah, I was a graduate student assigned to assist him. He was the writer in residence that semester. And so I was with him a lot, and we spent a lot of time together. He read some of my writing. He was very encouraging. We closed down a couple of bars. But the people in the bars were so kind that we'd stay there till 4 a.m, and they wouldn't try to push us out. You know?
You could write another book about that, right? You could follow up with that. That sounds like a good book right there.
Right.
And then you did write a book of poetry, right? That's fascinating too. These are your own poems?
Yes, it's called Under a Circus Moon.
Here's the book right here. I'm just going to hold it up for a second. We're going to get some close-ups of it a little bit later on. It's a Spinner Publications. It's called Blue Collars, and one of the things that's great, if you grew up in the city of New Bedford, or really any of the cities of the Northeast, you're going to notice the rooftops of all the different places, all the different mills that New Bedford, Fall River, any of the Northeast cities had.
Sure.
Very, very familiar. Why did you pick that? You really wanted to get the city in there?
I wanted to get the South End in there.
The feel.
The feel of it.
Mm-hmm. Well, you told me that it took you a long time to write the book. From the time you started writing the book until its conclusion now, we're talking about a number of years, right?
9.
9 years. That's almost a decade.
Yeah.
Well, you want to get it right?
You want to get it right. I started it in 2009,
right.
And of course I was still teaching at the time.
So once you retired, you had more time to put the finishing touches on this book.
Absolutely.
You know, I'm going to tell you a 30-second story. When I was in school, one day we walked in, and I went to UMass Dartmouth. The professor said, "Write something. Write anything." And everybody's looking at each other. Are you kidding me? Yeah, you're going to get graded on this. Write something. You know.
Okay.
So I'm like, I don't know what to write. On the way to school that day, I got cut off by a crazy driver. So I just started rambling about how this crazy driver cut me off and what an outrage, and the people drive crazy and everything else.
Right.
And the thoughts started coming to my head, and the professor thought it was great, you know. So it was kind of fun, but to actually sit down and take all of your thoughts and put them in the book, I guess when you dig into your own brain, there's stuff there that you got to get out, right?
You don't really know at the beginning what you're going to write.
Yeah.
You start it, you know where you're going to stop, but you don't know where it's going to end. And then the characters kind of take over.
The idea of coming up with a name for a book, you're going to write a book, and now you got to come up with a name. Did you have a bunch of different names and you ended up with Blue
No,
Collar?
that was it.
That was it? How did you come up with it?
Right from the beginning. I was thinking of blue collar workers, and the blue collar workers of New Bedford. But it's also blue in the sense of sadness and difficulty, and that was very important to me. I wanted to write about a working class family. The story also is about childhood abuse, which I wanted to talk about and to be a voice for others who have been through that, to take it out of the darkness and set it up to the light so that people could really see what it was like and how it affects a person and a family, and the family dynamic of when something like that happens. The main thing is trying to have it not be an embarrassing secret, you know, for the family, for the person who was abused, because that's how predators thrive.
If somebody has some kind of a trauma, some kind of a problem when you're a child, it really does affect you when you're an adult.
Oh, sure.
Right. So how did you dig into that issue?
As an adult, when her predator dies, she comes home for the funeral, and after that goes into a very deep depression. And it's not until she is hooked up with a very good psychiatrist who gives her the strength to look at the past, open it up, examine it from all angles, and see how it's affecting your present day life.
A lot of times the kid who was abused blames themselves, even after they become an adult, and intellectually they know it wasn't their fault, but
That's
they still
right.
think there's something I could have done differently. Why do you
That's
think
right.
that is? Have you looked into that at all?
Yeah, I have. It's because a child feels like a co-conspirator. And you know that you're going to get in trouble if this is discovered, so you know it's wrong. But you're too afraid to speak out. You don't dare speak out. You can work on it with a psychiatrist. You can, as you said, intellectually, you know you're not to blame. But there's always that little piece of you that feels that you are to blame.
I know a lot of our viewers, they grew up in New Bedford, probably the South End, North End, whatever.
Right.
But a lot of the memories are the same, right?
Yes, my greatest memory is probably going to the beach. And Hazelwood Park was always a great place for a picnic, a family picnic, you know. My father had grown up in the South End, and he loved the beach. And I think I use this in my book. He used to say to us all the time, he'd say, look at what we've got here. What more could we want?
Yeah, right.
Who needs family vacations? This is
Well,
it.
especially in the summertime, it's like you're already
Right.
you're already at a resort right here. All you have to do
That's
is
right.
walk down the street.
Right.
So all of our Ward 6 people out there, they know that they definitely have a special spot for the South End with the beach right there. What do you see as some of the biggest changes, the South End, the downtown, the whole city in general, would you say?
Water Street. Water Street used to be a thriving business section of the city, and it was great for people in the South End.
One of the things that we want to mention too is there are some difficult racial issues in the book, and one of the things I always loved about growing up in New Bedford is its diversity.
Yes.
You know, you can grow up in other areas of the country and you don't see anybody from any other ethnic or racial background.
Right.
And when I went to school, and you mentioned in the book, there's African American, Cape Verdean, Portuguese, Irish, French, people of all different backgrounds, and when you put people in the same place and you really understand that everybody's kind of in the same boat, it really, those barriers break down, don't they?
They do. And Finn's friendship with Connie runs deep.
Now, Connie is an African American?
Yes.
Okay.
And she lives on the corner, around the corner.
Yeah.
And they meet in the library, and
Were they very young when they met?
Finn was 8 or 9.
Right.
And
So that's before anybody really has any kind of prejudices really too much at that
Right.
age, you know?
right, but then she learns about the prejudices.
Right.
Because she starts to see life through Connie's eyes. And I won't say some of the experiences that she told me about and that I saw, but they were terrible.
Of course.
And as a kid, you're clueless. You don't realize it, but it's necessary to realize it. And I use some language in the book that may seem inflammatory. I don't intend it to be. However, we're talking about the 50s and early 60s,
Right.
and that's the way we talked.
Right, exactly, right.
Yet you have to use the vernacular of today.
Well, one thing you mentioned is that all the different folks from the different backgrounds, they were all in these three-deckers. So you're going down the street and there's three families all the way down the street. And so you really had no choice but to try to work it out if you're having a problem, right?
That's absolutely right.
Teenage years of Finn, background of the Vietnam War and all that, very turbulent time in our history in the
Very
60s
much
and
so.
so forth. Much different decade than the 50s. A lot
Oh
of
my
things
gosh.
changed all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Can you
all of it.
reflect that in the book?
Yes, I do. And the Vietnam War was on TV every night. It caused family arguments about who was for the war and who was against it. I was worried my brothers would get drafted, and fortunately they didn't. But yeah, it was the background, and we had hope that we could change things. But when Bobby Kennedy was assassinated, that was the big change. That was when you stopped and said, my God, they're killing all the good people.
Yeah, right.
And we lost hope, you know. We lost a sense that we could make real change, and I think about that a lot.
Yeah, right. And obviously you had the assassination of President Kennedy earlier in the
Sure.
decade, about 5 years before, but the back-to-back Dr. King and Robert Kennedy within a couple of months of each other, April to June.
Right.
Wow, I was a kid and I can remember it. I wasn't, I think I was 8 or 9 years old, and I remember thinking that we can't be seeing our leaders assassinated.
Exactly.
That's a terrible, awful thing that was going on at the time.
Yes, I really feel kind of strongly that if Bobby Kennedy had lived, we'd be living in a different world right now.
You talk about Finn peeling the wallpaper in the room, trying to get to her brother's room. What was going on there without revealing too much?
Okay, Well, the peeling of the wallpaper is a metaphor for peeling away of the layers of a life. But as you peel away the wall, you go through paint, you go through different kinds of wallpaper that reflected all the years, that went by in the tenement, contact paper and flowery paper and, all of it.
Yeah, this stuff is deep.
Yeah.
I like that. The metaphor is great. I didn't even think of that. I'm like, okay, they're peeling the wallpaper. But yeah, every layer that you take up, okay, this is now, well, that next layer was from 10 years ago,
That's
and then
right.
maybe the next layer was from 20 years ago, and
Yeah.
maybe you find some hole that was there when you were a kid that got patched or something. So you have that and her trying to get to the room at the same time, see?
Right.
Obviously, writing a novel is a little bit different than poetry. How did you come to write poetry?
I started writing in high school because my sister wrote poetry and I wanted to be like her.
Okay. So when you write a poem, you really got to get deep into what you're trying to say and what your thoughts are. And I was thinking to myself, I wouldn't even know the first thing to say in a poem. How do you dig deep enough to be able to get that stuff out?
It all starts with an image. It all starts with a visual image of something and what that image makes you feel like and how you want to express that feeling in a poem.
Right.
But as with novels, you start the poem and you don't really know where it's going to go.
And that happens in Blue Collars as well, the development of the story. So when you started the story, you didn't know how it was going to end. You started writing, and I didn't know that. I thought when authors wrote books, they kind of knew where it was going to go. It's going to start here, it's going to end there, and now I got to write the middle. That's not the way it is at all, right?
No, well, not for me anyway. I think some authors do use outlines, but I never was a proponent of that. And everything I write, I never know how it's going to end. You have to let your subconscious take over because that's where the deep stuff is.
Right. Now, what about like rewriting and trimming, and you write it and you got to kind of draft, and then you write a chapter and like, I don't know, I got to move some things around, and that's got to drive you nuts, right?
It's a pain.
If you say so yourself.
Yes.
Well, there's some days where you're like, wow, all these thoughts are flowing out of my brain, but there might be other days that you're drawing a blank, right? Does that happen?
There are. Yeah, oh yes.
The old writer's block thing, that really happens?
That really happens. I had a 10-year block just after I was married and had children.
Right.
Where I wasn't doing any writing at all.
Right. That will sideline you a little bit, focusing on the family.
Yes.
Blue Collars, it was written by Catherine McLaughlin. It is published by Spinner Publications. All right, so in your final thoughts, like, what is most satisfying about putting this thing together?
There's a great sense of pleasure that you've created something. And you like what you've created, and you hope to God everybody else will too.
Well, I think they will, especially anybody that's grown up here. And right here, we're going to have the paperback version coming up down the road.
Down the road.
All
yes.
right. They always say available in paperback. Well, not yet. But she just brought what's going to be the paperback version, just so we would have it. Hey, Catherine, thank you so much for stopping by New Bedford Connections. It's been a lot of fun learning about writing a book about growing up in the South End. Again, the book is Blue Collars. The author is Catherine McLaughlin. No matter where you're from, you're going to enjoy it. Hey, I'm Paul Santos. Thanks a lot for looking in. We'll talk to you again soon.